some researchers, we make well over 1,000 decisions every day. Well, since we're making so many decisions each day, has any of you ever stopped to wonder why you make the decisions you make? When asked, most people would say because it was the right decision to make. In other words, they looked at both of their options and they made the rational decision. However, as Dan Ariely points out in his book, Predictably Irrational, the hidden forces that shape our decisions. Many of the decisions we make are actually irrational. Then, in simpler terms, Dan Ariely says that he can predict when you are going to make a decision that flies in the face of common sense. Now, when I read that for the first time, I was thinking to myself, pretty bold claim there, Dan, but I'm not buying it, right? Just as many of you were probably thinking, you may be able to predict the average person's decisions, but let's get real here. We're all way smarter than the average person. I mean, we are Toastmasters, right? Well, it turns out that Mr. Ariely has actually done a ton of fascinating research to back up his argument. And tonight I'd actually like to share with you the story of one of his experiments. So in this first experiment, Mr. Ariely set up a table with a sign above it that read, 1 chocolate per customer. Now when potential customers stepped up to the table, they noticed that he was actually selling 2 different types of chocolate. The first was a high-quality truffle from Lindt, priced at 15 cents, while the other was your average, everyday Hershey Kiss, priced at 1 cent. Now, after a while, Mr. Ariely looked at the sales statistics, and he wasn't surprised to learn that the majority of customers acted a good deal of rationality, with 73% preferring the truffle, while only 27% chose the Hershey's Kiss. Well, in his next experiment, Mr. Ariely decided to lower the price of each chocolate by a mere 1 cent, making the price of the truffle 14 cents and the Hershey Kiss free. Now, according to all rational logic, everything should have stayed the same. The truffle was still the higher quality piece of chocolate, and since nothing changed in relative terms, the response to the price reduction should have been the same. However, when Mr. Ariely looked at the sales statistics, he noticed that the Hershey's Kiss now became the favorite of 69% of customers, while the truffle was only chosen by 34% of people. The presence of free actually led people to make an irrational decision. So what is it about free that's so enticing? Why do we have this irrational urge to choose a free item, even when it's something that we don't really want? The best analogy I can give to explain this would be when you go to a career fair. You walk around, you go up to each table, and you grab a free item, and next thing you know, you come out with this big goodie bag full of free pens and free flash drives and keychains and all these other things that you know as soon as you go home, you're most likely just going to throw them in the trash anyways. Right? So imagine for a second that these companies just charged you 1 cent for these flash drives and these pens. How many do you think you would take home with you at the end of the day? Well, after many repetitions and variations of his experiment, Mr. Ariely started asking himself the exact same questions. And the conclusion that he came to was that when we approach a decision, we approach it by looking at the upside and the downside. So when we price something as free, what we're really doing is we're completely removing the downside, or the fear of loss. Okay? And when we remove this fear of loss, what actually happens is people get this emotional charge in them, and they perceive an item to be much more valuable than it really is. So, like I said in the beginning of this speech, I said every day we make well over 1,000 decisions. So now that you know and you're aware that the fear of loss has such a profound impact and influence on the way you make decisions, how are you going to read? Will you continue to make decisions the same way that you always have? Or will you take this information and this knowledge and put it to use by becoming a more rational human being? Thank you.